Good evening, everyone. This is Spirit of the Light Virtual Church. My name is Rob Harris, and we're finishing our lesson on the New Testament and the Bible specifically. Go back a couple of slides. Get there. The Bible is lesson 5. We'll be finishing that up this evening. Then we'll be picking up with prayer next week, lesson 6. And my wife, Assistant Pastor Evangelist Rosalind Harris, will be teaching that one. And I don't know how many weeks she'll need for that. Do you know how many weeks you'll be discussing prayer, Rosalind?
Three, approximately three weeks.
Okay, so she'll be going over it approximately 3 weeks. So these are the sections of the New Testament. You see Book of Prophecy or the Book of Revelation, the last section, with Revelation being the last book. And that's where we are, the Book of Revelation. These are all of the general letters we just covered. And we talked about the 3 books written by John. This book, Revelation, is the last book that was written in approximately 96 AD, and it was written by John as well. So the book of Revelation is the only book in the New Testament that is referred to as prophecy. It is written by the same John who wrote the Gospel of John in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. And the book was written around 96 AD. Now, this book, Book of Revelation, it kind of differs from the other books of the New Testament. It gives an apocalyptic vision of what's going to happen in the future state of the world. It's the most prophetic work in the New Testament, and the visions in it can be compared to some of the ones that we discussed that the prophets had in the Old Testament books, although they had prophecies which made up a portion of those books. Revelation in itself is pretty much one large vision that Jesus Christ gave to John, I'm sorry. So with this difference being an apocalyptic book, the book still is true to the apostolic teachings or the gospel of Jesus Christ that the other New Testament books referenced as well. And these are 7 aspects of the book of Revelation that brings to fruition things that were discussed in the other New Testament books. The events accomplished by God, particularly as they pertain to the person of Jesus Christ, all been done in fulfillment of Scripture. Matthew, God has powerfully acted for our salvation, especially through the death and resurrection of Jesus. Found this in Acts. This same Jesus is now the exalted Lord, having ascended to the right hand of God and taken his place on God's throne. He now executes the purposes of God as the living Lord of the cosmos. Again, that goes back to Acts. All who believe and confess the person of Jesus Christ will experience the salvation of God, referencing Acts. God's Spirit has been poured out on all those who name the name of Christ. Acts in Romans, a commitment to God through Christ means participation in a fellowship of worship and instruction. Acts in Romans, and the same Jesus will come again to rescue those who have confessed him in faithfulness, which you can find in Mark. These are 7 points that are expressed in the summary of Revelation by Robert Sloan. That's in the Coleman Concise Bible Commentary that you can find here at the bottom. Reference. Now, John had this vision. The vision came from Jesus, and this was while John was on the island of Patmos. He was exiled there because of his Christian beliefs and his activities by Emperor Domitian, who viewed these activities as a threat to the Roman Empire. It is a complex apocalyptic work that reveals the ultimate victory of God over evil and the establishment of a new eternal order. Here is a summary of his key sections and themes. Starts out with the introduction in letters to the 7 churches. Then it moves on to the visions of God's throne in the sealed scroll. Then it discusses the 7 seals. Then the 7 trumpets, the woman, the dragon, and the beast, the 7 bowls of wrath, and finally the fall of Babylon. So the 7 churches of Revelation, we see Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamos, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. So John introduces himself and describes a vision of Christ, who instructs him to write to 7 churches in Asia Minor. Each letter addresses the strengths, weaknesses, and spiritual challenges of each church and urges faithfulness and repentance. In chapters 4 and 5, John sees a vision of God's throne in heaven, surrounded by worship. A scroll sealed with 7 seals is held by God, and only the Lamb, Jesus Christ, is worthy to open it. This Lamb represents Jesus, who, as we know through all of our reviews of the New Testament, sacrificed himself for humanity. Then we get into the 7 seal. Each seal is opened by the Lamb, and certain judgments unfold, symbolizing turmoil on earth. They included conquest, war and bloodshed, famine, economic hardship, theft, the martyr's cry for justice, earthquake and other cosmic disturbances, and then there was a silence with the 7th seal as we prepare for the 7 trumpets. And these 7 trumpets are described in chapters 8 through 11, and each trumpet signifies very specific plagues upon the earth, and they're all listed here, 1 through 7. And with the 7th trumpet, in the arrival of God's kingdom. Then we come to chapters 12 through 14, where John is revealed the woman, the dragon, and the beast. These are symbolic figures. A woman who is often seen as Israel or the church, a dragon which is a symbolism for Satan, and two beasts, which are oppressive powers. These figures depict the ongoing spiritual struggle between good and evil. And that moves us to the seven bowls of wrath, chapters 15 through 16. Seven angels, one for each bowl, pours out bowls of God's wrath against the earth, which brings plagues that affect humanity and the earth as we prepare for the ultimate defeat of, of evil. These bowls included in the specific order of each bowl: painful sores, the sea turning to blood, fresh water turning to blood, the sun scorching the earth and the a certain portion of humans that are on the earth, beasts into darkness, and people gnawing due to the intense pain, and the preparation for battle from the sixth bowl, and then the final destruction of evil is described with the pouring of this seven. In the fall of Babylon, chapters 17 and 18. Babylon is a representation or a symbol of a corrupt, oppressive world system opposed to God. The chapter's detail is fall, symbolizing the downfall of human pride and rebellion. And we move to the final battle and judgments. Christ returns as the conquering king, leading the armies against evil forces. Satan is defeated, cast into a lake of fire, and a final judgment occurs where the dead are judged according to their deeds. And we conclude towards the end of a new heaven, a new earth, and a new Jerusalem. After all evil is eradicated from the earth, God will create a new heaven and a new earth, free from sin and all suffering. This new Jerusalem, the holy city, descends from heaven, symbolizing God's dwelling with humanity. The book closes with a message of hope, urging readers to remain faithful until this promise of Christ's return comes. So the themes carried out in the book of Revelation, it presents themes of perseverance, the victory of good over evil, and hope in the midst of suffering. So despite an intense imagery and symbolism in this book, its core message is one of encouragement, reminding believers of God's sovereignty and eventual renewal of all creation. The book concludes with the assurance of eternal peace and communion with God, inviting readers to be prepared for Christ's return. So this is the bookend with Genesis being the first book of the Bible, and starting with the creation of the world and the creation of man. Revelation, last book of the Bible, discussing the end days, the destruction of everything evil, and man's restoration, or God restoring man and the earth to a position that he created that goes back to the very beginning of the book. And all the items in the middle between those two bookends describe the body, nation, ethnicity of Israel. And then that moves into their salvation and the inclusion of the Gentiles in the promise to the body of Israel and God's promise of restoration and his communion with mankind as we move forward from that state. And that pretty much covers the book of Revelation and brings to conclusion after, I think, 11 or 10 weeks, the books of the Bible. I'm here with Evangelist Assistant Pastor Roz, Willie McQuarrie, and Minister Douglas McQuarrie, and Rosalind has a statement as we close out this section of.
Oh, I had a question. You mentioned that the two false prophets were representation of oppression, I believe, and destruction. I hadn't heard that before. I was wondering where or who, how, the source of that information. Is that a theory, opinion, or fact?
Um, it's a theory, it's not, it can't be a fact because these are things that have not happened yet. So it is a prophecy. We know the Revelation is full of symbolism in the what the
But it
two.
is a fact because we know heaven is heaven and that we're going to heaven. If you have faith, that's a fact, right?
Yes, that it's when I say it's not a fact, it's a promise that has yet to manifest itself on earth. I'll phrase it like that. That's what faith is. So, but the symbols of the beast, and if you can give us a brief recap of what the two beasts are, I was trying to be um, to swiftly move through it without getting into um, much of the details of the book. Why don't you describe for us what the two beasts are?
I'm asking you because I don't know. It said oppression and destruction, and I hadn't heard that before. There is a parallel, I think, between the false prophets and the prophets of Christ, but that he think is going to be Elijah and maybe Moses, but we don't know. But I hadn't heard that before, and I was just wondering if I missed something in my reading and where that came from. That's all. So I don't know.
Okay, if we recall, one beast came from the sea, one beast
Mm-hmm.
came from the earth, one is
Mm-hmm.
called the Antichrist, and one is called the false prophet. And if we remember the mark of the beast on 666, all of the followers of the beast had this mark, and all of the other people who were Christian followers of God did not have the mark of the beast, and they fell into oppression during that time frame. So that's where the ideal of the beast creating oppression comes into play. Op, oppression amongst the Christians because they didn't bear the mark, so they had to suffer through that time period because, again, Satan looked after Satan, and if you didn't bear those marks, you were ostracized. I guess this the best way to phrase it. So does that bring it more into focus to what you've read.
Yes, but the Antichrist and the dragon are separate entities then.
Yes, the
And the
Antichrist.
dragon's not
The
okay.
Antichrist and the false prophet are two separate things. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And then in tandem were the ones who create havoc amongst the earth.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Uh, Anything else from anyone?
It's been an interesting 11 weeks. It's been informative. And I want to say thank you to you both.
Thank you, Minister Derek.
Appreciate, but I didn't do anything much. Just run my mouth from the side. But thank you.
That's yeah, true. She has reviewed the preponderance of the lessons which I teach, and she usually have these thought-provoking questions as she reviews them, and we debate over an inclusion or exclusion of certain things. So she has been a blessing to the class thus far, although she's been silent in class up until next week, and she gets her turn in the hot seat. All right, everybody, I will not prolong the evening. Here's our contact information. Please, if you heard anything you like here tonight, please on Facebook, like and follow us on YouTube, subscribe, and you will be hopefully informed whenever any of our new teachings come out. We've doing this 11 lesson, no, 11th chapter. It's more than 11 lessons on new beginners class on Mondays. Then we have our regular Bible study on Sundays. We need prayer. We have our prayer meetings on Wednesday, our Sabbath on Fridays, and then our first Sunday sermon with a communion service that follows that. So thank you for your time. We love that you were able to spend a few minutes with us until we come together again. Be blessed and hope to see you in our next venue.
Bye bye.
Bye.